Okay. If you want, I can record my screen and then.
No, I'll
kind
be
of put
able
it together.
to, I'll be able to stitch it together.
Okay. Good deal. So I called this the fully stimulated Rails app to the Ruby tie-in. It's not just about a JavaScript thing. Ruby tie-in is how Stimulus let us build the kind of Rails app that we wanted to build. You know, I'll get into that. But so, what is Stimulus exactly? It bills itself as a modest JavaScript framework for the HTML you already have, and I would say, or the HTML that you want to build, which was our case. So, kind of the history where I landed into Stimulus was I inherited an app in the company I work at now that was midway through splitting up an old Rails app into a service-oriented architecture idea. So there was one part was a Rails 3 app, one part was a Rails 4 app that was kind of acting as a just an API server. And then there were 2 or 3 JavaScript only Angular 1 front end things. Each one had like their own server and they were all deployed from different repos. And so you would go to some of the new parts of the app with these Angular front ends, and the parts of the app that hadn't been migrated over, you would end up over in the Rails 3 app. So, but there was only a team of 3 developers. So every change was complicated. You had to make a change sometimes in 3 repos just to add a feature or fix a bug or something. And kind of my first step was, hey, time out, you know, as a business, it's kind of more important that we can display a table of data in HTML, no matter how it loads. It doesn't need any fancy animations or whatever. We need to go back to Web 1.0 and get that solid before we have this, you know, astronaut architecture kind of thing going on. So, so what I started doing was just bringing everything back into the Rails 4 app, and we had Turbolinks on that. Turbolinks, if you're not familiar, is basically it. When you click on a link, it loads the page that link was going to load in the background, and then once it's loaded, it replaces the body of your current page with that information, which is basically it. And so with Rails and Turbolinks, you can have pretty much a single page app kind of feel with just the old tools you're used to, which is kind of the theme of this talk. Is I just wanted the skill set that we had on the team was geared towards let's just render HTML views and get features out. We had someone on the team that was a JavaScript enthusiast, I would say. He's a kind of a junior developer, and so he was kind of maintaining our Angular front ends, but he wasn't taking them any further than really just maintaining them. And so we would get a lot of benefit from just going back to just HTML. So Stimulus builds on top of Turbolinks and adds some really cool features. And I would say the coolest part of Stimulus from a technical standpoint, I'll show more useful examples, let's say, more practical stuff about this, but just at a kind of low level, Stimulus is like this abstraction, this wrapper around this really cool idea called Mutation Observer. And that's a DOM API, so it's a thing that browsers let you do, and it has really wide support, actually. Kind of surprised. I think it goes back to Internet Explorer 11. But basically, this thing lets you hook into the DOM, and when something changes, it will react to that. So in the beginning was JavaScript, right? And you had you had some ability to kind of react to changes on the page or make changes to the page, and every browser was different, and you had the browser wars. You had to write for Netscape, you had to write for Internet Explorer. Then jQuery came around and gave us a nice layer over top of that and made it so we could write jQuery stuff and do pretty much the same thing for every browser. But there was a whole lot of, you would just write functions on top of functions, and they were not very reusable. That would just change the HTML of your page, and we would have to react to certain events and all kinds of stuff going on. And you would always have to, or usually you'd wait until the page was loaded. So you had, there were issues, I'll get to that. But this mutation observer is very cool. So when you load something that wasn't on the page when it first started, with jQuery you would still get like this document ready kind of thing, but then you would have to somehow, when there was a new element that wasn't there at load time, you would have, and you wanted to like do something JavaScripty with that, you would have to write the stuff around it. Mutation observer just says, hey, there's a new div on the page, what do you want to do with it? That'll probably become more clear later. Stimulus also provides some really nice connections between JavaScript and HTML. The typical jQuery thing to do would be you pass jQuery your class or ID tag, and so you were using the stuff, the points of contact that your designers were using to make something look a certain way, you were using the same thing for behavior. And so when someone wanted to change the way something looked, they might also destroy how it behaved. And so there was a thing, the guys that were on that podcast, Sam Stevenson and Javon, one of them did a talk at RailsConf or something where he explained this technique that they were doing where they were separating that. So they would leave the styles and IDs and stuff for the designers, and then they would add a data attribute that they would hook onto with jQuery or JavaScript or whatever. So this idea of separating the behavior and style is older than Stimulus, and then Stimulus made it very nice. This also allows for sprinkles of JavaScript. So the kind of app that I want to build and our team wanted to build for speed and for a lot of other reasons is the kind of thing that is just rendering HTML and sending it to a browser. And then when we need some little extra features, we sprinkle on some JavaScript in a place. So if you want a dynamic form, the whole app doesn't have to be rewritten. It's just that form gets a little bit of extra stuff. And it keeps that nice separation between your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You can do this kind of stuff with the big JavaScript frameworks today, like React or Angular or something. They're pretty sure most of them will let you contort it in such a way that you can just have one block on your page be a React app or whatever. But there's a whole lot of baggage that comes with that, and Stimulus lets you just add a little bit at a time. So real quick, I won't spend too much time on how to install it, but you can see it's like 4 or 5 things to install. You just go to the official documentation. It's super easy to get in if you run a few commands. So here's some comparisons. So in the jQuery world, when you wanted to actually do something, you had to wait. I want to wait for the whole thing to be there. Hello.
Hi, I'm sorry. We were supposed to have somebody in here. Y'all may have been put in the wrong room. What is this group?
This is the Ruby meetup.
This is the Ruby.
Yes.
Is that Kim Collins?
That's right.
Yeah, she
You're
told us something.
supposed to be in 110. All right, but that's okay. You're supposed to have been in 110.
Sorry about that.
And so, Mr. Jackson, so that should be okay. That's good.
Okay.
As long as y'all supposed to have a room.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, anyway, so you would wait for the whole document to be ready, and then you could do your jQuery. Otherwise, because of the nature of JavaScript, the div or the li or form element or whatever might not be there when the JavaScript ran. So standard jQuery is you'd have this $sign document, ready, and then you'd do a function and you'd have something in there. That would be waiting for the whole document to be there. With Stimulus, you only have to worry about the actual element that the controller is defined on. It will react when that thing is added to the DOM. So that's where it becomes a better thing, because your, especially with Turbolinks, your stuff might be there after this document ready thing fired. Or something you wrote might add an element to the thing. And so because of that mutation server, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road there. When the connect happens is when the element that Stimulus is defined on happens. So I'll keep kind of building on that. So here's a very basic Stimulus example. This is how you say, I'm going to use the hello controller. So in typical Rails style, you have a whole lot of convention over configuration. So this file is called hello controller.js. Like you would have hello controller.rb or widgets controller in a Rails app, whatever. You just name the file that way, and then it hooks up the name of the controller. So this is the element that when you hit connect, when this appears in the document object model in the document, that fires the connect, and that could be at the page load or whatever. But whenever this element exists, it could be before the whole document is there. You know, all kinds of stuff there. It'll run this connect thing.
So a mutation observer is very much like not just mutation, but also when it's created. Right?
Yeah, like any time an element is added to the thing. That's my understanding.
Oh, so when the document is mutated,
Yep.
i.e. when it receives new DOM elements.
It's very cool, and it's not exactly a Stimulus thing. It's just the cool thing that Stimulus took advantage of. So now, whenever I've got this data controller hello, because Stimulus hooked into that mutation observer that is a browser thing, the browser tells Stimulus, hey, here's this thing is there now, and you can use it. So then the connect command or function runs, and this is just well, here's the next thing. So this is another one of these hooks for Stimulus. You have these targets, and that's like I want to do something to this element. In your jQuery world, you would hook into the ID normally, and then you would do something to it. So these are roughly equivalent, but this again is going to wait for the whole document to be there. This is going to be anytime it's mutated.
How does your Stimulus controller know it's hello? Like, would it be?
Yeah. So this is that convention over configuration, where I'll show an actual file tree, but my file is named hello controller.js.
Oh.
Hello, additional controller.
Yeah, hello controller.
So for your data target, you load out output, is that just any string you want? Is that how?
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally, yeah. So whatever I call this, I need to prefix it with the name of the
With the
controller.
name of the controller, okay.
And then whatever, because you could have multiple controllers on one thing, or you could have controllers inside other, whatever. So you prefix it with the controller you're talking about, and then you define it up here, and then this output target is that thing.
How do I know that output target is that?
It's whatever you called it with target.
Target at the end?
Yeah,
Okay,
the
That's a
first
convention.
is a declaration.
okay.
And what you'll normally see in Stimulus controllers, because of the examples from the official examples and stuff, people write little convenience methods to make that shorter. But yeah, and then so this is an HTML node to JavaScript, and then you just call text content on it and set it. This is a jQuery function, the jQuery specific thing. But both of these set the throw hello whatever into that element. So build upon that with the idea of actions. So like the whole stimulus thing mainly is you have a controller, you have targets, so something that you just want to be able to reference, and then you have actions. And actions are really, really cool. So I'll just talk through this. So we have the same target we had before. Now it's an input. So this is just a field I'm going to type text into. And I get the target hello name. And that's going to come down here. This span with the data target output, that's where I'm going to put the hello world or whatever. And then this is a button that has data action click. It has this syntax that's a convention, but click and then stabby arrow with hello and then hashtag greet, hashtag pound sign, whatever, whatever your thing is. And what that does is it runs this greet function in the controller. And because it's a button, you could really leave off the click part. It'll just default to click. But if you had something else that wasn't normally a clickable thing, you would say, here's the event. So this is the click event. We'll trigger this greet
And those are
function.
your standard JavaScript actions, like I can use click, mouse over, all that stuff?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, mouse over, yeah, all that kind of stuff. I saw someone do a drag one. The other
I'll say with a mouse.
It's kind of cool, but yeah, all that kind of thing. So then, again, we're just setting the output target text content. But this is pretty much most of what you need to know about stimulus to get some like basic stuff going. The alternative in jQuery is actually a little shorter. It's a little more dense and maybe harder to read, but here's the rub, is that I'm dependent here with in my jQuery with these class names or whatever is in here, and the HTML doesn't send the action to the JavaScript. The JavaScript has to know that this thing exists, and so there's a little bit of coupling here, and it makes this thing less reusable, and that's part of why everyone's like, we have so much, even though jQuery is cool, I don't think people should hate on jQuery so much, but these days people are like, I have so much jQuery to replace with some fancy framework. It's because people wrote a lot of jQuery like this that did what it needed to at the time, but then it wasn't really reusable, and this, because it doesn't, because this calls this, I could have different stuff in different situations, and I can have it look different in 3 different places because it's not tied with the styles. There's all kinds of benefit because there's some separation there about how this is going to call. Anyway, hopefully that makes some sense. Any questions right there on what's going on?
Do you have to, like, you're defining the controller,
Mhm.
and then underneath it, you're repeating that every time. Is that
Oh, a little
required?
prefix?
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, you do, because you could do hello space foo space bar and have like 3 controllers on this
Okay.
this top little div and have different things going on inside it.
So there's kind of a container function?
Yeah, it's kind of, first of all, it's gonna,
I mean, it seems repetitive, so.
it's a little repetitive, but first of all, I'm pretty sure that the code in here that finds these targets and actions is looking inside that scope of that thing.
Okay.
So one thing I should say is think of this as a portable chunk of code
Right.
now. Because of that mutation observer, it could be inserted at any point you're not sure. So you kind of want to think of this as like a self-contained thing that then everything inside of it needs to be.
But you couldn't take each line, like the input, you couldn't add the data controller and the data target in one line, you have to still nest it? So you could have like 3 or 4 different things firing every which way?
I think
Not why you
I
wanted
don't
it?
remember what happened. I know I tried that once. I don't remember what happens when you do the target on the same controller. You don't necessarily need to, because you can say this dot element and get the controller thing.
I think, because the reason you want to do this is to not
Not
interfere
use
with.
classes.
Well, you
Separate
got,
your design.
yeah, your designers
Yeah,
are doing
that's one
stuff and you're just stepping on each other constantly,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah, that's definitely one reason. But yeah, you need the prefix because you could have multiple.
yeah, my question was really more like, can you not have the controller? Because you're
Oh.
prefixing everything, is the controller just a,
Right now, at least, the controller is like the whole trigger to
The
load.
controllers for your JavaScript logic lives.
Yeah.
right?
It-
No,
it-
I get the controller down here, just up in the definition, because
Yeah.
every command he's doing is prefixed with the controller name. So
Yeah,
I'm just
you-
going like, is the controller declaration just
You gotta tie the thing.
just
back
for
to that.
readability almost at this point?
Because you might, like I said, you might have 2 controllers, so you would have 2 different.
But each of your targets is saying controller, and then, you know, your target or your
Yeah.
action. So I'm going like, is that controller declaration
Necessary, I know what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, could
That's
you,
the thing that kind of triggers everything to load in the first place.
could data target be just name versus hello.name?
No, because you could have multiple controllers on one thing.
Okay, I get it.
And so like you'd have one wrapper for all kinds of different behavior, and then you would do different stuff in the same one.
Let's say if the hello was like a component and there's 10 of them on the page, would state be, would there be one controller for all 10 or individual controllers for each?
It would be like an instance of each of the
instance.
controller for each
Okay.
thing. And I'll get to an example where we manage state. That's like the last.
That's exactly where I was thinking, yes.
Yeah. State is managed in HTML, which is cool. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. Let's see what's okay. So don't die on me. Okay. Yeah. So here is my my contrived example. It's kind of based on my my actual app, which maybe I'll show. Oh, come on, guys. Here we go. Come on, demo gods. Have favor on me. So here's a, it's just a graph with C3, and that is loaded remotely. So let me show you this. This load bar is CSS, and that's like the default state. And then when the chart has loaded, like the JSON from the server has said, here's the data to put in the chart, it replaces that load bar element with the chart. And so that's a stimulus thing. Then kind of wrapped around it are these tabs. So the idea is maybe you want to see the table data that's behind you want to see the chart in table form. And that's also remotely loaded. And it's not a very useful thing right now. Anyway. Actually, I didn't know why. Anyway, so that's the idea, is that you would see these things, you would be able to kind of toggle between these things. It would load remotely. The other thing is, I wanted, because some of these charts might take a while to render, I wanted the page to load like that with Turbolinks, so the page is instant. I click on something, instant page, and I got loading bars. That's your standard kind of single page app kind of feel, but instant response, and then it loads the things that are slow in the background. So I will show some of the code around that. So I've got, first of all, here's your standard Rails tree. See that? It's probably hard to read. I don't think I can increase the size of the tree, sadly. This. Maybe. Oh, come standard Rails tree, and if you, I forget what version this started, but Rails 5 and up has the JavaScript folder under app, and if you install Webpacker, which you do to get Stimulus, you get packs in there and you get an application.js. Stimulus installs this controllers directory under JavaScript, and all of this is Stimulus code. The thing that handles the chart is this. So let me just talk through this real quick. First of all, I'm importing my stuff in ES6 JavaScript style. Then I define my controller, which every Stimulus controller basically starts at that. I've got my targets that I want to see. Let me show you the HTML. So this is the chart right here. So I've got data controller chart. I've got some state that I want to send to it, or like a variable that I want to send to it, which is format this thing for money, and then the URL that it's going to get the data from is there. And this brings me to another thing. Like I want to be able to set this with Rails.
Right. Like I saw one of our apps that was putting Rails and React together, and I think I watched it for a week to figure out how to get the routes in.
Exactly. Yeah. So because this is rendered on the server side, the Rails server knows all about my routes, and I can use all the route helpers. And I'm sending the state through HTML, so it's just an ERB view, and that's part of like the whole reason. It's like I get to use just Rails and Ruby and build a fancy app.
That's
So
what your fetch was doing in the chart controller.
exactly. So I'm sending all this stuff there, and then you've got the connect thing. So as soon as that DOM element is there, it's basically running the load function for this thing, and that's here, and that's doing fetch, that's straight JavaScript. There's nothing fancy there, and it does a promise. So yeah, it handles a thing, and then it renders the chart with the chart library using options. And the rest of this stuff is mainly convenience methods to make this whole thing cleaner.
What's the targets again? Is that?
Yeah. So this is the div that I want to stick the chart in, because I want to style it with CSS or whatever. So I'm going to, first of all, I need to give it an ID just for the chart library. So it will bind to a DOM element, but then I want to style it like a chart container. And then here's the target. It looks exactly the same, and that, maybe that's redundancy, but it's useful. And then this load bar is a helper method that builds a div that does the load bar, and I give it the target of chart load bar. So in here, then I get the convenience. Stimulus lets me find those two things. So when I'm done with the chart being loaded, I can remove it easily. Then I do some stuff to just send an event that the thing got loaded. But that's mostly it for loading that chart in the background. The other cool thing that we use a lot is this. It's very similar. It's got a fetch, but this loads the table, and the HTML for that is
That's the data table.
is here. Yeah. So the data table uses this tab loader thing. And that means when the tab is selected, it will load that HTML behind the scenes. And so that's actually here.
And that goes back to his question earlier. You saw that he was declaring the controller, the target, in the same div.
Yeah.
That's interesting
And this,
that you
but
had
yeah.
two controllers in the same DOM wrapper. Is it because the loader you felt was abstractable enough to another component, so you felt like it was a new controller, or why not put the action of the loader in the
Well,
DOM wrapper?
yeah, okay, good question. So some of my tabs I might not load remotely. I might just load it when the page loads, and then you can see it when it happens. But here's the other thing that's going on is that here's a data controller is the tab loader for this one thing, but this is a target for the tabs itself. So because this is, I called it a tab panel, it's the div that gets shown when the tab is selected. The tabs itself is a controller, so here's data controller tabs. And by the way, here's the state that gets sent to stimulus. So here's how that works. The controller is called tabs, so then I do a data, the controller name, and then the variable that I want to get in there.
Yeah.
And then tabs, where are you? Then, so I've got this convenient method to get the index, and that's this .data.get is a convenience that Stimulus gives you to load whatever's in.
That's your, gets is your, I guess gets and sets are your state.
Right, you can set state, you can get state, you can ask if it's there, you can say if this .data has something. So yeah, this .data gets that whatever is in there, and so then that's again something cool because I can pre-fill this with ERB. So when the page first loads, I can send state that's generated by the server, and then after that first load event, Stimulus can manage that state if necessary. And that's what happens with this. If I wanted to, I don't know, if I had lots of tabs and I wanted to have a default tab for the user, I could set that with ERB here, and then afterwards, Stimulus would change that. So let me actually show you that working. I think in this case let me make this. You go down here. Okay. You go away. So here's my tab index, and if I click that, it changes it. Probably because I did that on purpose. But gotta remember all this code I wrote. But yeah, so data set index value. It's going to set it there, and that is super useful because this is a Turbolinks thing, but when I click a link, I want to go to another page. Turbolinks is going to cache this page as it is right now before I clicked it.
But if you click the back button,
And so when I click the back button, it's going to go right back to where it was.
it'll actually pull it from cache, and then we'll go to the server, get the new page, and then somehow it wires your state up from this page to that one.
Yeah, so so my state is saved. This is the state that Stimulus set, and that's the tab state. So I can rely on that going back and forth between.
So if the contract is, I guess, if you use the get and the set states, then it knows about the state, and when it has to redeal with the DOM element, it will look at its state, and it knows the points where it's connected, and it will do that for you.
Right, for the basic HTML kind of stuff. Here's a thing that's a gotcha when you're working with third-party libraries. So my chart controller, I've got all this stuff to do the loading, and that is because I actually put a sleep statement in this to make it slow. So I've got my interactive chart here where I'm hovering over things and it's showing me stuff. If I go to a page and then go back, now it's not interactive anymore because Turbolinks, this is an SVG graph. I mean, it's like HTML text nodes it's in the HTML, it's not a picture. So Turbolinks dutifully cached exactly like all the HTML and SVG, but there's nothing to say, hey, you need to reconnect that third-party chart library behavior to the thing. So that's what disconnect is useful for. Disconnect is when your controller element thing is going to go away from the DOM, like a Turbolinks load, just change the whole body, and my controller is not there anymore, or that div with the controller thing isn't there anymore. Disconnect will run, and so I can unload the chart. It saves on memory, whatever. It's going to tear it down, and then on the back event, I'll reload it.
Will that disconnect will that reset your state as well?
Yeah, for that chart.
For that chart?
It's gonna like reset that. It's basically like a new page load. So this is like an escape hatch. It's like people complain about it. Turbolinks doesn't work with stuff. Well, you just need to know the escape hatch is like, okay, I need to like reload this because that chart library expects to be loaded to hook everything up.
Page on the custom made catalog, we use Turbolinks in the entire catalog, and the product detail page has a lot of state.
Yeah.
Where you can click swatches and it will load a different shirt. And I just had to declare Turbolinks bankruptcy, managing that one. And just say, well, it's in Turbolinks, but none of the state is persistent, right?
Yeah.
So if you select it on the green shirt and then went to another place and hit the back button,
Yeah.
it might not be the green shirt selected or something.
Right. Most of the time, everything works, but for certain things like that chart library, I just have to unload it and reload it. But Stimulus gives you those things. So anyway, hopefully that makes some sense. What else was I going to show you? So back to the state stuff. Back to these tabs. I've got things inside of things, and so that's part of why you kind of have to be explicit about what thing connects to what thing. This tab thing is pretty cool. I actually just lifted it right off of an example in the Stimulus forum. It just goes through all the tab targets, right? So I've got things that I call tab in the HTML. I have more than one. Then I get this tab targets plural, and I can just go through each one and say, is this one the one that is currently selected? I can set up these nice convenience methods for panels, or what I'm calling panels, but that's all cool stuff. So that's the rough idea of Stimulus, and I think I want to close with a little tour of the app that we actually used, because again, like the main thing was this let us build the kind of app that we wanted to build. So this is our app. It's an analytic app for nonprofits and like churches of their giving. And so we chart this stuff. This is all demo data. It's not real data, but each of these little pieces is remotely loaded. I don't know if I can get it to. We also cache everything in the background, so those loading bars go real fast. But the kind of architecture that we wanted was, again, you click something and the page is instant because it's almost nothing. It's just the container that's going to remotely load all this stuff. And then using Stimulus and that content loader controller, it's like 80% of the workload that we do. All this stuff is loaded remotely. Now, one of the really cool benefits, so let's see, load that so I get this history. How do I see my, I'm just going to load one of these. So I think this was the thing, Colleen, I was like, I'm going to show you an example of this. So the this little thing called roll up that is just a bunch of text is an ERB partial in Railsquare. And the way we have it architected is that the Stimulus controller remote loads this URL. Remember we showed where we passed that URL into the as a variable into the controller. All of these are real Rails routes that'll just load by themselves, and then I have a little bit of code. Application controller. Where are you? There you are. My application controller has a method called rendered for raw HTML, and then the we have hundreds of these little charts and stuff to load. Sometimes on a page, you might have a page like this, lots of little things to load. And the challenge was, how in the world do you come up with all the routes for this stuff? So we came up with some namespaces for major chunks of this thing, and then at the end, with this example, it's probably hard to see, but this last bit of a string is like the show ID, right? So this loads figures controller show and passes this string. Well then, so this is like a parent figures controller, but in all the little figures controller, we'll implement just a whitelist array of the strings that we're going to let in, right? Because we let's see, I'm going to find the MTD. So here's an example. Maybe we've just been drawing all this stuff up, so now it's all kinds of redirections. Well, here, yeah, this. Okay, so this is the HTML that probably runs that one chunk. It's just plain HTML and it's ERB, and so I can run all kinds of Ruby code and stuff in there. Where was I going with this?
Are the figure IDs like database IDs or?
No, it's like a wire to a partial. So I wanted to on the fly in my view, hey, I want to render this partial from this. I want to remote load a partial from this place, and I just want to call it whatever I want to call it because for debugging purposes, I want to track that thing down. Mm-hmm. If I've got the other thing was I'm gonna deal with a whole lot of duplication because I have a suspicion that all of these are going to get changed slightly.
Okay.
At least when we were building it, it was I want the potential for each of these little things to have its own partial. I'll clean it up. I'll see what the actual duplication is later, and I'll clean it up and make it all nice and neat. But in the meantime, because I know I'm going to build part of this, and then the bosses are going to say, "Hey, what if we just change the title of this one thing?" So
that was my next question. Why like a crazy string versus a logical name? It's because the logical name could change later.
that might change, or you might have one metric that we want to see in 3 different ways. I want a chart version and a table version, and I want a year-over-year chart version. I want all these different kinds of variations of the thing, and I just want to come up with a naming scheme, and I want it to tie to a partial file somewhere that I can tweak or debug. That makes sense. So this whole structure was, how do I have hundreds of these little things and route to them, and then remote load them. So anyway, it gets down to it and just actually calls. The reason I whitelist this is because it actually sends the string as a method to the report object. So they're all whitelisted, so that I can do this. So in every controller, you say, okay, which thing should be coming here? And usually, if something comes in that isn't in the array,
Another way to protect that is you could have actually asked it to respond to it, I guess.
yeah. But
You gonna say YOLO report?
year over year.
Okay.
But yeah, I didn't have a good way of like naming all this stuff because it was so on the fly. It was like, hey, I have a new idea for a chart or whatever. I was like, okay, I'm just making it partial. Yeah. So anyway, this lets us build something that we can cache on the server and render on the server and route to in creative ways from the server, and the front end, for the most part, we can write it like we're writing a 100% server-side app, but it has the behavior of a fancy React whatever front end.
It feels like you navigate around because of Turbolinks too.
Yeah, so yeah, between Turbolinks and Stimulus, it feels like a single page app. But 99% of it is on the server.
Did your project start off as Turbolinks and jQuery, and then you had to slowly migrate to Stimulus?
Yeah, but I hadn't written a lot. It was almost just HTML and Turbolinks, or ERB and Turbolinks. So we were just starting things.
You can pick off certain parts and say, let me try this
Exactly.
in Stimulus and mix the two.
Yeah, so I actually still have some CoffeeScript stuff that I'm wanting to turn into a stimulus controller, and then I even have some. I mostly made myself write ES6 and do it in the new style, in the new where is that? JavaScript's packs folder. So, for instance, here's a thing that does our drop downs, and it isn't a stimulus controller yet. It was something I wrote before getting stimulus. But this is something, like right now, it's dependent on Turbolinks load. This would be an excellent candidate for stimulus because I could do the controllers and I wouldn't have to worry about reinitializing them in certain instances if they didn't. But this is the top of the class.
Go down the bottom.
Oh,
So I noticed app is going to be drop downs.
this is something I just did. This is something I used to do when I was just pretty much heavy jQuery. I would write a class app. So when I need like JavaScript variable globals, I put them on that app instance so that it's not a real global. It's there.
Well, the thing I was looking at is it looked like you were using event delegation, which is
A little bit, yeah.
which is what we had. So basically, you go jQuery document on, so that when you then so that you can bind the class name, and then as it bubbles up, so the thing cannot be there. Does anybody ever use event delegation? So like typically in jQuery, you would do like say you get the element and you say when you click on this element, right? But if the element's not there, or the element can be taken off the page and put back on, you can do document.on, click the selector for the element.
Right. Yeah.
Right, so you actually put your event observer on the document way high up, and then if something were to happen with an element that matches that selector, as the event, it's called bubbling up, it would bubble up to the document. Then your document will go, oh, does this event selector match the thing that you told me to watch? And then it would fire. So it's kind of like saying, like, eager events are like you get the element, you bind your event handler. The other way is that all of ours in the catalog is leave all of our event handlers are on the document and stuff.
I'm pretty sure I do that somewhere, but yeah. So most of our app is written this way, and the only time I had to, again, escape hatch.
Oh yeah, you wrote syntactic sugar too for your own stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I like sugar. But I'm also writing for we have several, I'll say early career developers. You know, junior isn't always the best descriptor, but they're new and they, you know, don't necessarily know all of this stuff. And if I can give them conveniences,
It could be late career.
yeah.
Can you go back to the chart loading
Yeah.
controller, stimulus controller?
I also want to say, I want to jump in real quick. Single owner says import star as D3 from D3.
Yeah.
I finally got it to work during
hate-
this because
hate
you got
these
it there.
imports.
In all the tutorials,
Oh,
it
wait,
would say
it's
to
not
stick
the
it. No, that's the only one I was missing. I originally just had D3 loading into the script from the application HTML. You know,
It's-
that's the easiest way to.
It's so
to
hard.
But so for this, because we're changing over Webpacker for Rails 6, and so Webpacker gives us an application.js where you're supposed to import all of your
Yeah.
JavaScript.
Dependencies
Yeah, all the dependencies. But that D3
doesn't
won't,
want to be imported.
it won't, so you have to restate it within the stimulus controller.
Some of these, a lot of libraries are being converted, I guess, to where
Yeah.
they can be imported. But there's so much stuff still out there that you,
UMDs, I think, is what they're called, universal module definitions.
So this,
Yeah.
have you found that a current pattern is that you also need to make sure, if you put it in your application.js, you also have to stick it in the individual stimulus controller?
Well, that's what you have to do in Node, right? Like, and you could use, even though your thing's packaged up to a thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, you have to, if you use moment.js, right, you have to import moment.
yeah.
For each individual controller that you have.
Right, it's like C, I
Okay.
think. Right,
What-
so
Huh.
it's like C.
What I did for now is I have a few things that are just old style. They expect to be loaded by a script element, on the page. They don't have a way to import them. So I put in my HTML, I put my asset pipeline JavaScript thing above my new style Webpacker packs
Mhm.
JavaScript thing. And so if I try to avoid putting something in the old asset pipeline that's JavaScript, but if I have to, I put it there and then it's loaded before, and it usually works. But
That solved it.
Well, one second.
Yeah.
You were asking a question there.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
we go off track.
Okay, so what I'm trying to understand, and I'm thinking of this compared to like a React, like a framework, is this creating my HTML element
No.
or my load event? So it's just importing it. Where are you actually saying, hey, if you haven't gotten the results yet, show load?
It's under the fetch.
Okay,
So
so
under, yeah.
Oh no, so good question. I think I know what you're saying. So where was that? I don't have the HTML in front of me because it was in that other thing. Let me load the other code quick because otherwise I'm going to be hunting down for the actual related thing. So in my HTML, I have the load bar,
I see.
which looks like, let's see, app helper. This is just a helper that builds a content tag.
Okay.
And the load bar is entirely CSS. So
Okay.
the server is rendering the load bar, and that's the default state. If
Right.
there was nothing, you would just see load bars.
Okay.
The data chart URL, that's where it gets the HTML file. You see right
Yeah.
there? And then so he's declared a path in his routes. That would be a normal show. So you'd have a get, show.
Yeah,
follow
let me
that
show you what
model.
that looks like.
And I guess that show action, is that what you're asking, Colleen? Like what loads or?
Well,
That's how you know what HTML
I'm trying to
takes to
think,
load.
like, when you do this in React, every, we call them modules, but
Component, yeah.
thank you, every component, it's like, hey, show this load bar, which is a different component. So I just import the loading component until I get the response from my JSON API, right? And then
That's
I
right,
show
yeah.
my other components.
It's
So
like
I'm trying to
components and
understand,
components
if
and
I wanna
components.
move this into stimulus, which I kinda do,
Yeah.
like, how do I then?
You would
mirror
write
that?
regular Rails
HTML.
HTML first. So this is the path to that figures thing, and I only did this because this is how I architect the app, to allow for all these figures. But so
Okay,
there's a
that's your
path.
routes file?
This is my route file, yeah.
Good shit.
This is fancy smancy new fangled.
No, I know,
Conservative
right, but it's
stuff.
like only 20 lines
So
long.
tiny.
Well, this is not my whole. This is not my real app. No, that's the fake app. So this is the. Here's the real
Oh,
app.
there we go, that's what.
Okay. Okay. There we go.
But so we get the.
This is where he throws the early career developers in.
Yeah. So we take this giving information, the donations, and we say, okay, we're gonna segment it by like new donors, core donors, people that are giving us a certain amount year after year, and like the top givers. So I'll take this segment and I made a namespace around it, and then I have this overview page, which is just like the it's this very page here. I'll find my new givers overview, and it's just a show file that remote loads all this stuff. And then there are figures for. So then we have like the aspects is what I call them. It's like acquisitions or no. These are the metrics. You know, acquisition or retention, or there's all these different like metrics on each thing. And then inside of those there are things. So it's like this like exponentially growing need for all these different endpoints, right? So that's why I've actually got a loop generating some routes here, but it's not too crazy. But I've got a lot of namespacing so that I can do these, and then there's controllers that are part of each thing, especially these figure controllers. And those are where the whitelists are, and those wire up the partial that I want to render, or the JSON that I want to render. Like the charting thing, the only JSON I'm doing is for the charts right now. Otherwise it's HTML. Let me show you another cool thing. So we let people, they give us their giving information. They might have funds. Let me think of a name that might be. So this is an autocomplete thing. This is stimulus as well, and this is one instance where I actually generate a little bit of HTML. So trying to think of some names. General fund, right? So these are little pills, I call them, and they're just, here's the things you've selected so far, and if you want to get rid of them, you click it. And under the hood, Stimulus is managing all this state, and then the form is submitted like any other form. It gets, there's like a hidden field behind here that has all the IDs for the thing. I could keep rambling, but
That's awesome.
Can you share your chart and
Yeah.
that write-up you did or that code you did?
Yeah, so,
that was sweet. I didn't understand it.
Stimulus also has a little handbook.
Yeah, it has some great
And it'll walk you through, and it has the fetch code and everything else.
Whatever it is, it's gotta be using the rack, because I still haven't been able to contribute to our rack project, because I didn't feel like spending 2 days writing up a bunch of connectors and other stuff like that.
So
I could get one simple thing done in React.
yeah, so I lifted the core of that remote loader from this example where they.
Oh, this is their docs?
Yeah, they got great docs.
Yeah, they have a straight up tutorial.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So this is their example of remote, working with remote content.
There also is is it installed through a gem still? Stimulus?
No, it's
There's
Through
a,
Webpacker.
there's a rate command I ran that bootstrapped my project that wasn't using Stimulus with Stimulus. I didn't know if that was still available.
I don't know about that, but you
Webpackers.
Webpacker install. Here's how you get this going.
Oh, it was a Webpacker thing. That's it, Rails
Yeah.
Webpacker. That's it. I had to do that.
But under the hood, that's really doing a yarn add to
Oh.
your packet. It's
Yeah.
They give you an npm folder
yeah.
that has all of your JavaScript.
You get a node modules thing that will have 10 million files in it.
Let's see which one. I'm looking at my Stimulus talk I did a while back ago.
So is Webpacker Rails 5?
No, Webpacker is like an independent thing.
Okay.
It's like
No.
It's default for Rails 6.
Yeah,
it's
it's
gonna be
not
default
Rails,
for
it's
Rails.
not Rails 3.
Yeah.
It's not Rails 4.
No, it's not Rails 3.
no, but Webpacker, the gem, will work with Rails 4. I used it before we upgraded to Rails 5.
See, this is what you miss when you
Yeah.
sit in your cave by yourself.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So what the hell is that?
But and to be fair, if you want to run a React app, you can do Webpacker install React, or Webpacker install
that's
Angular, or
Yeah.
Webpacker install Vue. But then you won't have cool Stimulus app.
So when's Rails 6?
It's already in beta 3.
Beta 3. It's probably gonna land
So skip Rails 5 and just jump
May.
right to it.
like
That's what I
first.
did.
Yeah.
My last work was with Rails 3, and then I just started this project on Rails 6.
Jump right into Rails
and all
6,
that.
yep.
And that's how I started learning that
When I
stuff.
first started my first
Yeah.
grouping job, our Rails job, we were pulling SVN from Rails pre-1.
Wow.
That's
We were hardcore, and Mark was like, he's like, hey, just SVN up every now and then and see what breaks.
I'm pretty sure I did something in Rails 1, but my early experience is mostly probably Rails 2. But
So, I think next time
Still
you give
works.
this talk, when you talk about sprinkles, I did this in mine, you should use the salt bay.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I need some good
I love that one.
good memes and gifs to add to the thing.
Always does.
I want to go with salt bay.
But I just wanted to close with, if you're looking for where to go next, stimulusjs.org is awesome. They've got a handbook and a reference now. The community is a discourse
So,
forum.
I mean, what do you guys, just like for the group, what do you guys realistically think is gonna happen in the front end? I mean, you have Vue React, which have taken on so much steam. Do you think with Rails 6